What if starvation isn't a tragic side effect of us policy, but the policy itself? Venezuela isn't collapsing from war or drought. It's being slowly strangled by spreadsheets, sanctions, and naval blockades sold as freedom. Donald Trump doesn't need bombs to break a country. He just needs to cut off oil, freeze cash, and wait while inflation eats faster than people do. Children skip meals, professors beg to survive, and Washington calls it leverage. Hunger becomes strategy. Suffering becomes bargaining power, and the cameras look away. So here's the uncomfortable question no one wants to ask. Is Trump trying to fix Venezuela or deliberately starve it into submission? Washington insists there is no blockade on Venezuela. No declaration, no war resolution, no dramatic press conference with flags and generals. Just a calm, bureaucratic smile and the phrase targeted sanctions. Yet tankers stop moving. Insurance evaporates. Ports go quiet, banks freeze wires. Oil sits in storage while supermarket shelves thin out. This is how a modern blockade works when you want plausible deniability and maximum damage. In classic international law, a blockade is loud and unmistakable. Ships are turned away. Navies announce exclusion zones. Lawyers take notes. What the United States has built around Venezuela is more elegant and far more ruthless. It is a blockade assembled from compliance rules, financial choke points, maritime pressure, and selective enforcement. Nothing is officially banned, yet everything becomes impossible. Export oil, and you risk seizure. Insure a tanker, and you risk sanctions. Process a payment, and your bank risks being cut off from the dollar system. The message is never shouted. It is whispered, and everyone obeys. Venezuela is not a diversified economy. It breathes through oil. Oil is not just revenue. It is food, medicine, spare parts, fertilizer, and fuel. When oil exports slow, dollars disappear. When dollars disappear, imports collapse. According to United States Department of Agriculture projections, Venezuela must import more than half of its corn supply. Corn is not a luxury. It is the base of the arepa, the daily bread, the cultural constant that crosses class, region, and politics. No oil exports means no corn purchases. No corn purchases mean hunger spreads quietly, meal by meal. Supporters of the policy argue that sanctions target elites, not civilians. Reality disagrees. Inflation does the dirty work. When foreign currency dries up, the local currency implodes. Prices race ahead of wages. Pensions disintegrate. Hunger arrives not with famine camps, but with refrigerators that hum emptily in middle-class apartments. This is starvation by arithmetic, not spectacle. It is slow enough to deny, fast enough to kill. The most cynical twist is the selective nature of enforcement. Some shipments are blocked. Others move through discreetly. Certain traders obtain licenses. Others are made examples of. This controlled uncertainty keeps the system obedient and corruptible. It also allows Washington to say with a straight face that humanitarian exceptions exist even as logistics, financing, and insurance make those exceptions useless in practice. Food may be allowed. Paying for it is not. This strategy does not seek immediate collapse. It seeks exhaustion. It assumes hunger will pressure society until politics breaks. It treats suffering as leverage and time as an ally. The cruelty lies not in chaos, but in order. Every delay is calculated. Every restriction is deniable. Every consequence is blamed on someone else. So when officials say there is no blockade, they are technically correct and morally absurd. The ships know, the markets know, the families skipping meals know. And the question hanging over this story is not whether the blockade exists. It is far darker. How much hunger does Washington believe is an acceptable price for control? In Venezuela, inflation does not follow hunger. It leads it. Long before stomachs growl, prices sprint. Long before shelves empty, money collapses. Inflation eats first, and it is never full. This is not an abstract economic concept debated on cable news panels. It is a daily ambush. You wake up employed, educated, respectable. You go to sleep poorer than you were that morning. By the end of the month, your salary is a rumor. Triple-digit inflation is not a bug in the system. It is the system under pressure. When oil dollars are blocked, foreign currency vanishes. When currency vanishes, the local money turns radioactive. Prices update faster than menus can be printed. Pensions disintegrate in real time. Savings become a punchline. The cruel joke is that technically food still exists. It is just priced for a population that no longer exists. This is why hunger in Venezuela looks different from the stereotypes broadcast during charity telethons. Yes, children in poor neighborhoods go to bed hungry, but so do retired engineers, so do former judges, so do university professors whose lifetime salaries now buy a handful of eggs. Jess Fays Turrialba described a country where intellectual prestige no longer protects you from starvation. Elderly academics survive because former students organize secret collections to keep them alive. This is not poverty. This is social inversion at speed. Inflation is politically useful because it is invisible at first glance. There are no mass graves, no airstrikes, no rubble, just receipts that double, then triple, then mock you. Governments love inflation because blame scatters. The regime blames sanctions. Sanctions advocates blame corruption. Economists blame mismanagement. Meanwhile, inflation quietly selects its victims. Babies through malnutrition, seniors through slow decline. The middle class through despair. International analysts warn that Venezuela is sliding back toward hyperinflation, the economic equivalent of a heart attack. The last time it happened, people weighed food in grams, not portions. Medicines disappeared. Crime surged. Families fractured. 8 million people fled. The conditions that triggered that collapse are returning, only now with tighter financial chokeholds and fewer escape routes. This is not recovery stalling. This is relapse. What makes inflation especially lethal is its psychological damage. When money stops working, planning becomes impossible. You cannot save. You cannot budget. You cannot imagine a future. Every decision becomes short-term and desperate. People sell furniture, then appliances, then dignity. Inflation turns society into a clearance sale of human potential. From Washington, this looks like internal failure. From Caracas, it feels engineered. You do not need tanks to break a population. You just need prices to outrun hope. Inflation does not shout slogans or wave flags. It whispers the same message every morning. You are running, and it is faster. And that leads to the uncomfortable realization few want to say aloud. If hunger were the goal, inflation would be the perfect weapon. Clean, denial ready, slow enough to avoid headlines, fast enough to hollow out a nation. The only question left is chilling in its simplicity. How many empty wallets does it take before empty plates become policy success? Donald Trump has never hidden his preference in foreign policy. He does not admire democracy. He admires control. Elections are messy. Parliaments argue. Courts interfere. Dictators, on the other hand, deliver results. They silence dissent, move fast, and never complain about hunger statistics. For Trump, that is not a moral failure. It is operational efficiency. This is the great illusion of the Venezuela story. Trump talks like a strongman slayer, but governs like a strongman shopper. He did not replace authoritarianism. He rebranded it. Madurismo without Maduro is not a bug. It is the upgrade. A system that keeps repression intact while offering Washington predictability, obedience, and quiet cooperation. Stability, Trump style, means no surprises and no public resistance. After the 2024 election, which the opposition overwhelmingly won, the Democratic path should have been obvious. Instead, the regime simply changed faces. Delcy Rodríguez stepped in, not to represent Venezuelans, but to reassure Washington. Her real constituency was not voters. It was policymakers. As long as oil flows selectively, migration stays manageable, and protests remain contained, democracy becomes optional. Hunger becomes tolerable. Marco Rubio, the intellectual architect of this approach, understands something Trump values deeply. Desperate populations do not demand rights. They demand survival. A hungry country does not organize strikes. It lines up. It negotiates. It accepts humiliation in exchange for calories. This is why dictators under pressure often tighten food control before tightening censorship. Empty stomachs are quieter than free minds. Human rights groups estimate nearly 800 political prisoners remain locked up. Many were activists from the movement that actually won the election. Some were held incommunicado for months. Families were kept in the dark. Relatives became leverage. Rafael Tuderes, the son-in-law of election winner Edmundo Gonçalves, was not imprisoned for a crime. He was stored like a warning. Hostage diplomacy modernized, yet none of this disrupts Washington's calm. Why would it? Authoritarian partners do not hold press conferences. They do not leak. They do not embarrass their patrons. They absorb pain domestically and export stability internationally. That is the deal. Trump does not need Venezuela to thrive. He needs it quiet. The hypocrisy is almost elegant. Publicly, the United States claims to defend freedom. Privately, it rewards compliance. The more efficiently the regime suppresses dissent, the easier it becomes to justify cooperation. Sanctions remain. Repression remains. Hunger deepens. And Washington calls the outcome containment. This alliance also solves a political problem. If Venezuela were democratic, it would demand sanctions relief, humanitarian access, transparency, and accountability. Dictators ask for none of that. They ask only for survival and selective permission to operate. Trump understands transactional loyalty. Democracy negotiates. Dictators comply. So when officials praise stability, listen carefully. Stability does not mean prosperity. It does not mean justice. It means predictability under pressure. It means a population too exhausted to revolt and a leadership willing to absorb blame. Hunger becomes part of the architecture. Trump's favorite allies are not those who free their people. They are those who manage them efficiently. And the most unsettling truth of this chapter is not that dictatorship survived. It is that it was quietly upgraded, polished, and accepted, because in Washington's calculus, a starving nation is far easier to control than a free one. When crises become impossible to ignore, politicians reach for a comforting phrase, humanitarian aid. It sounds clean, moral, and inexpensive. A few ships, some photo opportunities, a press release about compassion. In Venezuela, this illusion is deadly. Aid does not fail because people do not need it. Aid fails because the system it enters is designed to distort, capture, and weaponize everything that moves. Venezuela does not suffer from a total absence of food. It suffers from controlled access. For more than a decade, imports, storage, and distribution have been centralized, militarized, and corrupted. Warehouses answer to political loyalty, not nutritional urgency. Trucks move according to allegiance, not demand. In this environment, aid does not flow downward. It pools at the top where it becomes currency in a different sense. Humanitarian organizations understand this risk, which is why they insist on independence, monitoring, and scale. Token deliveries solve nothing. A few containers cannot feed millions, and selective access only strengthens the gatekeepers. When food enters a system where hunger is already a tool of control, that food becomes leverage. It rewards obedience. It punishes dissent. It teaches people that survival depends on silence. This is why promises of exemptions ring hollow. On paper, food and medicine are allowed. In practice, nothing moves without financing, insurance, transport, and approval. Banks refuse transactions. Shipping companies walk away. Insurers vanish. Aid that cannot be paid for, moved, or protected is not aid. It is a headline. The bureaucracy does not block trucks. It suffocates them long before they start their engines. Corruption sharpens the blade. Import contracts disappear. Subsidized food reappears on black markets at prices no pensioner can afford. Military-controlled distribution networks skim relentlessly. This is not inefficiency, it is extraction. Hunger concentrates power because it creates dependency. A population that eats at the pleasure of the state does not protest. It waits. Even oil revenues, when they appear, do not change the equation. Without transparency, fresh income does not rebuild supply chains. It disappears into security budgets, patronage networks, and offshore accounts. The logic is simple and brutal. Regimes under pressure do not invest in feeding critics. They invest in paying those who protect them. Secret police salaries rise faster than food imports. This is where the international fantasy collapses. It assumes a neutral state that wants its people fed. Venezuela does not have that luxury. It has a ruling structure that survives precisely because scarcity keeps society fragmented. Hunger divides neighbors. It forces choices that erode solidarity. It turns communities inward and political demands into private desperation. Meanwhile, donors congratulate themselves for trying. Conferences are held. Pledges are made. Conditions are debated. The crisis deepens. Aid becomes a substitute for political courage, a way to acknowledge suffering without confronting its architects. It allows powerful actors to say they care while maintaining the policies that make care necessary. The most dangerous lie is the idea that humanitarian relief can coexist indefinitely with economic strangulation. You cannot starve an economy and feed a population at the same time. One hand cannot undo what the other is tightening. Aid under these conditions is not a solution. It is sedation. So when officials promise food deliveries as proof of concern, listen for what they are not saying. They are not dismantling the chokeholds. They are not opening financial arteries. They are not removing the incentives that turn hunger into governance. Until that changes, aid will arrive late, leave early, and save fewer people than advertised. The final cruelty is this: humanitarian aid is presented as hope, but under authoritarian control, it often becomes another instrument of survival politics. And the question that lingers uncomfortably unanswered is this: if hunger maintains order, why would those in power ever want it to end? Hunger is often sold as a controlled pressure tactic, a slow squeeze designed to force compliance without chaos. History laughs at this fantasy. Starvation never stays contained. It leaks across borders, destabilizes regions, and eventually turns against those who thought they were managing it. You can plan sanctions. You cannot schedule consequences. Venezuela has already demonstrated the first stage of blowback. When people cannot eat, they move. 8 million Venezuelans have fled over the past decade, one of the largest displacement crises in modern history without an active war. Border towns collapsed under the strain. Neighboring economies absorbed shock after shock. Migration routes stretched northward. Walls did not stop it. Patrols did not stop it. Hunger walks faster than policy. The next stage is instability. Starving societies do not simply endure. They fragment. Informal economies expand. Smuggling replaces markets. Armed groups thrive where institutions weaken. When food becomes scarce, control shifts to whoever can distribute it, steal it, or weaponize it. This is how hunger breeds insecurity, not order. It hollows out states and exports violence in all directions. Washington pretends this will not happen again. The logic is always the same. This time will be different. This pressure will be calibrated. This suffering will remain internal. Reality never cooperates. The same sanctions that crush civilians also create incentives for criminal networks, corruption pipelines, and geopolitical opportunists. Every vacuum attracts actors less friendly to United States interests. There is also the moral erosion. A policy that depends on widespread deprivation cannot remain clean. Officials stop using the word hunger. They replace it with technical phrases: economic adjustment, market distortion, secondary effects. Language becomes insulation. Meanwhile, images accumulate quietly: malnourished children, elderly people collapsing in lines, hospitals rationing meals. Eventually, denial collapses under its own weight. Starvation also radicalizes politics. When peaceful participation feels meaningless, extremes gain oxygen. Moderates lose credibility. Desperation rewards those who promise certainty, not reform. This is how sanctions meant to weaken authoritarianism often strengthen it. A population under siege rallies around whoever controls the gates, even if they despise them. Fear outperforms hope when survival is on the line. For the United States, the cost will not remain abstract. Migration pressure will return. Regional instability will deepen. Diplomatic credibility will erode. Allies will question the strategy. Adversaries will study it. Every future humanitarian appeal will be met with skepticism because people remember who tightened the chokeholds while offering bandages. Trump and his advisors believe they are buying leverage. What they are really purchasing is deferred chaos. Hunger does not produce gratitude. It produces memory. Entire generations will associate empty plates with foreign policy decisions made far away. That memory will not disappear when administrations change. The greatest miscalculation is the assumption that suffering eventually teaches obedience. In reality, it teaches resentment, ingenuity, and rage. It teaches people how to survive without systems, how to distrust institutions, how to see power as predatory. These lessons do not vanish when food returns. They reshape societies permanently. Starvation always backfires because it misunderstands human endurance. People can survive less food than planners expect, but far less humiliation than rulers assume. You can starve a nation into silence for a while. You cannot starve it into stability. And that is the final irony of this story. The policy meant to control Venezuela is laying the groundwork for consequences no sanction can contain. The question is no longer whether hunger will end. Hunger always ends, one way or another. The real question is far more dangerous. When it does, who will be left standing and who will be blamed for what comes next?